So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 1 of season 2 of the Football Insomniac podcast. We're delighted to be back here in 2021, and I am absolutely delighted to be joined by someone who you will have heard before, definitely, on BBC Scotland. You may not have seen his face before, but we're delighted to be joined by BBC commentator Paul Mitchell. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate coming along.
Oh, it's great to have you on, and we're back now in 2021. Everyone's feeling a bit more positive. We've got 2020 out the window. It must have been a difficult year for you as a commentator, especially not knowing when the games are going to be played.
It's been a very frustrating thing, and I think everybody's got their own particular problems. And as somebody once said, the problems that you have are the only thing you can truly call your own. So I do appreciate that there's bigger problems in the world. But as a freelance broadcaster, I was out of work for a considerable amount of time. I picked up only 3 or 4 pieces of work because simply there was no games, be they football, be they rugby. So it's a difficult time of year. The Scottish International Open Bowls, which I cover, got cancelled as well. That's quite a big week for me in terms of work. So yeah, it's had its challenges. I'm glad that football's continued, got back as quickly as it could. I think there's more to football than just the games being played. I think there's everything around the football, that helps people's mental health. We're talking about football today. We wouldn't be doing that if there was no football being played. You've got the fantasy football angle. You've got, all the games that spring off it. Some people, like to bet a little bit on games. So there's an awful lot that goes around football, and I think it's very, very good for us.
And what a week in football it has been. And not just talking about Scottish football, but looking at the football around the globe. You've got things like Chorley beating Derby 3-0 in the FA Cup, and then the post-game celebrations in the dressing room. I don't think any of them will quite get through the X Factor boot camp, but it was certainly something worth watching if you've not seen that yet. And then in Japan, the news broke that Kayashui Miura is now signed another 1-year contract with Yokohama FC. And you're asking, why am I talking about that? That's because when his contract runs out, he will be 54 years old. 54 years old, and he's still playing professional football. It's incredible. I mean, could you imagine any footballer in Scotland making it to 54 years old still playing?
I mean, I look at some of the guys that I work with, and they certainly look fit enough to play. There's no doubt about that, and they play, amongst themselves in their age group. I think what you lose a little bit is the appetite. You're certainly not as sharp as fit in terms of, because just the way the nature treats your body. It takes longer to come back from injuries, but age is a number in certain ways. And, we talk about veterans when guys get into their 30s. I think I once offended Eamon Bannon by calling him a veteran. I think he was 35 at the time. Some people don't see age. Some people look after themselves tremendously well. As I say, some of the guys that I still, work with could still play. They look as fit as an absolute fiddle.
And maybe some of them might get the call up from Celtic, considering the struggles that they're going through at the minute with their squad. The transfer window's still open, so you never know. But the main talking point, I think, in Scottish football this week is, will the season end prematurely? Now, obviously, last season did end prematurely with the outbreak of COVID-19. There is a meeting this morning of the 42 SPFL clubs. And we know as of, I think it was Saturday, the announcement came out that the games in League One and below are cancelled for 3 weeks, and that also includes the Scottish Cup. Now, looking at it, Paul, it's a different situation to what we were in March of last year when the games were all called off. This was something that was new, that was out there. A lot of people were falling ill. A lot of people were hospitalised. A lot of people were... we didn't really know what was going on. Now we're in almost a year later. The vaccines are being rolled out. There's treatments rolling out. And Scottish football's been allowed to continue until whenever the point is that they continue to. What is your thoughts? Do you think in the world, and obviously you've just mentioned the mental health aspect of things, of how it's helped a lot of people, but can you see football continuing to the end of the season, or do you think it will eventually be called?
It's very difficult because we've all got our own opinions. We all bring our own backgrounds to this. I'm very much a libertarian kind of guy. I'm a live and let live, less government the better type of guy. That we all have social responsibility. We should all be looking after each other. I would like football to continue because I think it makes sense to continue, certainly in the Premiership and the Championship. Going lower down when you've got guys that are doing other jobs and perhaps interacting not in the same way that our professional guys in the Scottish Premiership level are. It's basically, train, go home, and you're not going out to do a job. You're not out in the community in the same way. So I appreciate that it's very difficult. However, Scottish football has been given extra money, certainly at the lower levels, and that could be used to fund testing. It's difficult. Clubs are being asked to pay players, or will they let players go? It's very, very difficult. We've got to make sure we've got an infrastructure to come back to. And I think whatever decision you arrive at, it's got to be arrived at sensibly and with discussion. Now, as I understand it, and on Sportsound last night with the Stenhousemuir chairman on, who didn't miss when it came to say there was no consultation. Somebody somewhere decided that a 3-week stoppage was going to be enough, but without actually asking clubs whether they were prepared to undertake the required testing. My problem I've got is that we tend to lose a little bit of nuance on social media. We tend to say it's either black or it's white, where everything in this world is shades of grey. There is no right answer and there's no wrong answer here. I think what we've got to do is walk down the path of consulting people and coming to a consensus. Now, when you do that, a bit like an election, your team's going to lose at some point, but you're going to have to live with the decision that's been made. And people can accept that, but what they will not accept is not being part of that decision-making process and having things forced upon them. And that's been my biggest concern in this, is that we've not necessarily consulted particularly well.
And there's a lot of sort of external circumstances surrounding whether you can have this 3-week suspension for the lower leagues, because we've got what is still planned to be the European Championships in the summer. So they'll start about 2 or 3 weeks after the season finishes. You don't want any games in the Scottish Premiership or the Championship where players could be going away to the European Championships in the summer, still carrying on whilst the biggest tournament in Europe's going on at that point. So eventually there will come a point where there's no time left for these games to be played. And as you said, no one really wants the games to be called off, because as depending on who you support, obviously it's been a great season or it's been a terrible season, but it still gives you that something to look forward to at the end of the week. It still gives you that option to tune in, to watch it on the TV or to listen to yourselves on Sportsound. And it is a big part of a lot of people's lives in Scotland. So if this league was to be stopped, then you're suddenly looking to say, well, what fills that gap? There's nothing there to fill that gap. And the fact that we are able to test these footballers, yes, they've been given sort of extra. I'm trying to think of the right word here. They've been given sort of special dispensation so that they can carry on their work, which a lot of people wouldn't class as being essential. But they've been given the sort of privileges so that they can go and they can play, they can travel, and they kind of are inside their own little bubble as such. And to lose that, I think, would be a travesty, especially 2 years in a row. And you don't want to get into the situation that we were in last summer, where it took forever for people to make their mind up. Some people changed their mind at the last minute. And as far as I'm aware, and you might be able to tell me otherwise, I don't think there's any protocol in place at the minute for if this season was to be called prematurely.
No, we're living in uncharted times, so we've got to give those that are charged with making these decisions a little bit of a break. We can, however, criticise if we feel the decisions they make are wrong, or we would have done something differently. That's the joy of Scottish football. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody wants to think. Player safety is an absolute. And, I've been at grounds. The protocols are tremendous that teams have put in place, certainly for match day. I miss going to a ground and being able to speak to a referee, being able to speak to the coaches or the players, because everything is so restricted. And they've done it particularly well. I don't see any great reason at this time that we cannot continue the season, certainly at Premiership level and certainly at Championship level. But then you look at teams like Partick Thistle, who got, hoofed out of the Championship, which I still think was wrong. They could have another season down in League One, which they cannot afford and they do not want. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to try and come together for the good of the game and see how things are possible. There's two ways to look at every problem, and I've had people on my Twitter feed telling me I'm wrong, and that you can't do this, and take the 300 people going to Ross County for a game, and people say, oh, you can't do that, it's so difficult. Let's be honest, we can put a man on the moon, we can work out how to get 300 people into Dingwall. It's all about the way you come from it. If you view it as a problem, you're not going to do anything about it. If you view it as a challenge to be overcome, you can then, approach things with a positive mindset. Now, not everything's going to be possible. I appreciate that. And, we're not going to get fans back in the grounds at the moment. And that's quite right, given that, COVID is spreading. But it's how you look at things. And I think we've got to look to see how we can make things happen rather than the default position just be, let's stop it all.
Yeah. And as you said, when you looked at what happened last summer, no one wants to get back into that situation. You were put in the position where there was 4 clubs that actually took the governing body to court over how the season finished. And we're trying to talk up Scottish football. We're trying to encourage investment in Scottish football. We're still without a title sponsor. A lot of the sponsorship that's up in Scotland is now coming up for renewal. You want to attract people into the game. But if you took a look at the newspapers and you see stories like 4 clubs taking the governing body to court because they don't believe in the way that things have played out, that's not going to attract anybody to Scottish football. And it's got to be something, in my opinion, that when it comes to whatever happens, and obviously we're both of the agreement here that we want the season to be played out in full, if possible. But if it was to be called, you don't want to get into a situation where something like last year happens all over again and it's all decided by emails or it's decided by courts of law. It seems like a terrible position to find Scottish football in once again.
It's very difficult. I mean, there's so many companies that are having to react and do things differently and change. So, for example, the government at the moment is saying, well, the vaccination rollout's a difficult thing. Well, I'm sorry, you've had 8 months to plan for it. You didn't know when the vaccine was coming, but you could have done all the work. And the same goes for, the Scottish Premier League. You have to have a policy in place to say that if we do not finish the season, this is what's going to happen. You might not like it, but you go into that competition knowing that this is the possibility. England, they used points per game. Tranmere got relegated on points per game. Very, very harsh on Tranmere, but that's how it happened. Now, going into this season, the leagues will know that that's basically what they're going to do again. So you need to know exactly what the issues are. We're seeing it with these 3-0 results that have been awarded against some clubs because they breached COVID protocols, didn't go into play the games. Again, it wasn't clear what the punishments were in advance. You've got to outline these things in advance, because if you don't and they're not signed off, that's where the appeals process comes in. And personally, I like to see these games played. I think the clubs are naughty, but I'd rather see the games played than not.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but are we not still in the process where Motherwell have 2 games that they were previously awarded and now is up for appeal again? So if those games have to be played, you're now going to have to fit even more games into what is an incredibly tight schedule. Now, it must be great for someone like yourself to have a game to cover almost every day, but it does feel like that at the minute. I feel as though the enjoyment of watching football has kind of been tarnished a bit, not because of the fact that we can't get to the games, but it just feels as if we're being fed a lot of football all the time, and it's great at first, but then it feels as if you're watching 2 games on a Monday, 2 games on a Tuesday. It just becomes a bit much, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to be selective. I mean, I was in the minority when I said I didn't see any reason why the English Premiership clubs should have to have every game available on either Sky, BT, Amazon, or BBC. I mean, if we're used to getting 2 or 3 games a week, that's what it should be. Yeah, for this new season, I could understand last season. People were outraged by the pay-per-view model down south. I couldn't quite figure that out. As I say, I don't expect to get every English Premiership game on my television, be it, I subscribe to BT, Sky, and Amazon. I don't see why I should. It gets too much in some games. You wouldn't have interest in anyway. It's almost you've got to switch off and go and do something else.
Yeah. I mean, if you take a look at what the games were down south yesterday, obviously Manchester United had the game against Burnley. Before that, Newcastle played Sheffield United, and incredibly, Sheffield United got 3 points. I don't think anybody could have predicted that. But it is, I mean, there was 4 games down south last night. You covered the Dundee United St Johnstone game. That was on pay-per-view, I believe. That wasn't on TV.
Yeah.
So there is just a lot of football, and it's very hard to keep up at the minute. And then you get into the stage now where previously we would have had the Scottish Cup this month. I know those games are now going to extra time and penalties. What's your thoughts on that? I think that's a great move. I know the replay can be beneficial for a lot of teams if they're playing a big side and they get to go back to a Celtic Park or a Rangers, to an Ibrox, to a Tynecastle, to an Easter Road and get the money coming through. But I think it's a good idea to probably scrap the replays. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm not. I'm against that. I actually think that's part of the charm of the cup, is to be able to, to get a second bite. I mean, and sometimes the smaller club can go through as well. I mean, it is part of the charm. I mean, I think the problem I see in the Scottish Cup is I would rather see the clubs not allowed to play in the Scottish Cup unless they can host their own ties. For me, there's nothing more depressing than a team drawing Rangers, Celtic, Hearts, or Hibs and suddenly having to play at a senior ground that's not theirs. It just takes away from the charm of the cup. I mean, we've seen that in the FA Cup this week. I think it was Histon. Had basically a field with a few houses around it, but that's their home ground, and you can play there at the moment. I'd like to see the licensing change to say that this, your ground is suitable to host a cup tie. And if you draw Rangers, Celtic, Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, or whatever, and the capacity is only 500, fine. The capacity is only 500. Leave it on those grounds. I once did a game. I did. Unfortunately, it's now a building site. It's now got flats on it, but it's City Park. St Mirren came to play against Spartans, and my commentary position was level with the ground. It's the only time I basically stood on the touchline and watched the game. I mean, it was incredible. I think Livingston played there a year or two before. They got changed at Livingston and came through because the facilities weren't great at all. And that St Mirren game, and I won't name the centre half, but I remember one of the St Mirren centre halves coming off at half time. It was 0-0. I mean, the pitch was bumpy. Spartans were giving everything. It was a brilliant, brilliant cup tie. And he just looked at me and went, it was just brilliant because it's a great level, and that's entertainment for me. These guys, you're the better team. You're St Mirren, and Spartans got a replay. And had to take the game back to the old Love Street. And the great tale of that is the Spartans bus driver got lost. It was fabulous. So they turned up late. Brilliant.
I mean, I've been in that situation where I've went to games. As a Celtic fan, I watched Celtic play East Kilbride in the Cup a couple of years ago. And I think that game got moved to, was it Airdrie Stadium?
Yeah.
The Excelsior, that got moved to. But watching that game down south at the weekend, I think it was Tottenham Hotspur versus Marine. Marine of like the Northern Division B or something like that, taking on guys, and you could see round the houses, they all stood out in their gardens to watch it. There was the wives drinking the prosecco, and you could see they were all trying to get a bit of the action, and I thought that was fantastic. And it does have that great charm about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what the cup's about. And it's uncomfortable for these, professional players who are used to the luxury and things having to go there. At the end of the day, they should be better football players, so they should usually win the games. It's hard when you're playing against a team that is up for it. That's their cup final. It's a cliche, but a lot of cliches sadly are true. So they're going to give it their all. You saw it with Leeds United in Crawley. Leeds didn't fancy it, and their opponents did. And the depth of football in England, we tend to think that some of their non-league isn't great. Their non-league stuff's pretty damn good, in terms of quality. So you should never dismiss it.
And it was very close to Marine taking the lead, if anyone's not seen it, when the midfielder almost chips Joe Hart from the halfway line. Former England #1 Joe Hart nearly embarrassed by a Northern League Division B side. Fantastic. But getting back to the main point, obviously, and we're going to move on to our next topic very shortly. But on this, will the Scottish football season end prematurely? What is your opinion? Will we see out the end of the season? What does your heart say and what does your head say?
I think we'll see it out. I think for the good of, it sounds grandiose, for the good of the nation, but if it's safe to play, and that's got to be the number one factor, no doubt about it. If it's safe to play, let's get these games played. We get a great deal of enjoyment out of it. We get a great deal of watching it. There's so much that people talk about. We see it on social media, etc. Scotland loves its football. I mean, I don't know if you know, but certainly a few years ago when I was doing a lot of the games on the BBC telly, it used to be said that if a game was network across the BBC, the highest percentage of audience share would always come in Scotland because Scots want to watch football. It really is that simple. It is our national sport. We love it, but it's got to be safe. That's the key.
I think personally, to give my own opinion, I don't think the season will end. I would love it to end, but I don't want the football to stop. As I said, it gives you something to look forward to at the weekend. But I do have a feeling that the league won't finish, and I think that'll be a real shame. But we'll see what happens. We can only wait and see. I think it's out of our hands, certainly. It will be in the hands of probably the governing body and the Scottish Government to see what they decide to do. But again, Paul, thank you very much for joining us. So far, we've had lots of comments coming in. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, so get your comments coming in. Let's be honest, this isn't a Celtic show. This is a football show, and we're not going to get into the discussion over who would win the title if the season was to be called. In my opinion, you give it to the team that's top of the table when it's finished. So there's my opinion. But we are going to move on to another topic. And Paul, anytime I do have a guest on, I always ask them this question, and it's great to see some of the answers coming in from it. It is your dream football dinner party. So I'll set the scenario out here. There is 4 people from the world of football, whether it be dead or alive. We found a machine that's brought them back to life just for one night, and they are coming to the Mitchell household. Now, I always ask this question: what is your speciality? What would you be cooking for your guests?
Steak, without any doubt, a nice steak.
Now you're going to cause uproar in the comments here. How's the steak cooked?
Well, it's interesting. I was on holiday in Boston a few years ago, and I went to Frank's Steakhouse, which is in Massachusetts, and somebody asked for theirs well done, and you could have heard the kitchen explode. That's the way. That's the way to ruin meat. Now it's going to be a nice medium rare. Not too rare, but just on that side of medium. Nice medium rare. Personally, I don't serve it with sauce because that spoils it. Steak itself has got to be the star.
So steaks, and that set the bar quite high. I mean, we had a couple of people on before. I don't know if you maybe have heard of the ex-Morton social media journalist Ewan Boyle. He was on a couple of weeks ago, and he told me that his dinner party would be cheese toasties. So that kind of was the extent of his culinary cooking skills. So steaks. In fact, I want an invite to this one as well. Who is the first person to come through the Mitchell household?
So it's interesting. I mean, I could have invited 40, 50 people, So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be selfish, really selfish. It's people that I want to talk to. Now, there's loads of people from the world of football that have got great stories that have been entertained. If you've ever been to a football dinner, you've seen some brilliant people speak and things like that. But I'm going to be slightly selfish. I mean, I could, as I say, I could list 30, 40 people, but the first person that I'm going to ask through the door is Kevin Keegan, because Kevin Keegan was one of my football heroes. They say never meet your heroes. I actually got to meet Kevin Keegan. The BBC did a thing at his place at Braehead. They had a sort of Kevin Keegan football
school I remember that
for a while. And we all took part in various activities and things like that. And I got to meet Kevin Keegan. He was very complimentary about my left foot. I'm sure he didn't mean it, but it made me smile. I saw Kevin Keegan play for Hearts in a testimonial game. I just think he's a fascinating character. He's a lovely bloke. We'll remember the rant. It's Newcastle manager. I would like to meet Kevin Keegan, and for longer and talk to him. So that would be one of my guests.
Would you get him to perform as well? Would you get him to perform his number 10 hit?
No, I think was it Diamond Lights? He was no singing. We'll just have a chat. But he seems like a really decent bloke, and I'd love to sit and talk to him.
So Kevin Keegan is the first person. Who joins Kevin at the dinner table?
I'm not sure how many people will remember him, but he was a stalwart on Sportsound. He was a broadcasting stalwart for many years. I read his book. I was lucky enough to work with him for a long time. But the late Bob Crampsey, what Bob didn't know about football wasn't worth knowing. I think for people in the West, you read the Evening Times, that now you know with Bob Crampsey, great historian. Brave, I think he was second in Brain of Britain, or he won Brain of Britain, something like that. Just a wonderful, wonderful gentleman who I got to meet very early in my career with the BBC. And he did radio, he did television. He was a phenomenal intellect of a man. His autobiography about growing up in Glasgow is just a brilliant, brilliant read. So Bob Crampsey would be on my list. As I say, he's one of my favourite people I've worked with.
On the Bob Crampsey thing, so for me, I'm guessing this is before my time. What was his sort of era on the radio then?
So Bob was a broadcaster in the 60s and 70s. He broadcast on STV, broadcast on Clyde. He came across to the BBC. He wrote extensively. He was Queen's Park's historian. He was just a fascinating character. I think he had a photographic memory. He just was able to recall facts, figures, information. He was a man who liked to travel. He had a good sense of humor. I mean, I was lucky. I worked with him on several occasions, and he was just always engaging. We chatted about baseball when not a lot of people like baseball. A huge baseball fan. So he was just a really interesting character. And as I say, I mean, there was great stories of Bob. I think he covered a 0-0 draw for Sportsound at one point. And normally after that, you do the interviews with the managers, and nothing appeared from this game whatsoever. Pre-mobile phone days. And, it just turned out that Bob thought the game was so bad it wasn't worth speaking to the manager. So he just went home, Just love that kind of stuff,
Fantastic. So Bob Crampsey, Kevin Keegan, there's 2 seats left at the dinner table. Who takes the first one?
Well, they're going to come together. So there's a pairing that's going to come together. How about this? And it's quite a trend. No, they'd have to walk 500 miles, etc. Simply now, these two are a nice mix, and I've met them both, and they're lovely. But I would like to talk to them for longer. So they're currently the best commentary team in the country on television for my money, and that's John Champion and Ali McCoist. Because I think they'd be wonderful company. Now, from a boring, dull, techie football commentator, anorak point of view, I'd like to sit down and chat with John Champion. To me, he is the best commentator in the country. His vocabulary is tremendous. His delivery is tremendous. He's a broadcaster. And what I mean by that is you get a lot of commentators, but you don't get not everybody's a broadcaster. He really understands the medium that he's working with. He understands the people are listening. It's not all about him, which is a good thing. So, and Ali McCoist, the partnership that they struck up, the World Cup for ITV and now with Amazon Prime, is brilliant. I've been lucky enough to meet Ali on a few occasions, and he's just a genuinely lovely guy. Now, people will say, but he's a Rangers man, or he's this or that. We need to take some of that out and just actually appreciate people for who they are. I've met some fantastic people. Murdo McLeod, great guy on the Celtic side. Tommy Burns, could have had these people in as well. But I'm bringing Ali McCoist and John Champion together, because if round a dinner table, if they're not going to entertain you, who is?
Oh, I mean, listening to the commentary, they can, as you just said, like Bob Crampsey didn't interview people after a 0-0 game. John Champion and Ali McCoist could make a 0-0 game the best game of football you've watched all season. Even as a Celtic fan, I think Ali McCoist is one of the best pundits out there. I think he's absolutely fantastic, and he's honest as well. He tells it exactly how it is. He doesn't seem to, although he holds a bias towards Rangers to an extent, it doesn't come across that way. He's actually a very, very good commentator. And I remember watching him as a boy growing up, watching him on A Question of Sport, thinking he was absolutely hilarious. And he just continues to do it. And you see it now. He's been picked up by Sky. He's still doing the Premier Sports. He is the man that a lot of companies are turning to now. And it's just a testament to the kind of person that he is. After this is over, I'd love to go for a pint with Alan McCoist.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky to be in his company a couple of times. And he's just genuinely nice. He's a good bloke. He can be serious. He's got a great football brain, as you would expect. He was one hell of a player. He had a hard time at Rangers with everything that went on through that. I think he kept his dignity. He tried to do what was best. There was the furore about what Ali McCoist was being paid. And some people went off of Ali McCoist. That wasn't his fault. You can never blame the person receiving a salary. It's the people who give the money. It's like when people say, "Well, that footballer," I mean. At the moment, if you look, Shane Duffy's getting an awful lot of criticism, and one of the criticism comes with the fact, well, we're paying this guy 40,000 a week or whatever. The money's got nothing to do with it because it's not the player's fault that somebody wants to employ you at that rate. I would never, I would expect the same amount of effort from a guy on £1,000 a week, a guy on 10 grand a week. That's got nothing to do with it. How you've been able to negotiate your deal is entirely up to you. So we've got to take certain prejudices away. But I mean, Ali McCoy is just a genuinely nice guy. He's good fun. I mean, he would have story after story, I am absolutely sure. Because you just get special people. I've tried to do a little bit of after dinner speaking, and I have to say, I'm okay. I'm not particularly great. I'm not particularly bad, because I don't have that natural funniness that I think you need to be really successful. If you listen to someone like Jimmy Nicholl, I mean, if anybody's watching has had a chance to listen to Jimmy Nicholl tell stories, you would listen to Jimmy Nicholl absolutely all night, because he's just got that gift of the gab. Jim Leishman, John Gagan, people like that. I believe Tam McManus is very good. I'm looking forward to hearing Tam at a dinner at some point.
I've had the experience of being at a dinner where Tam McManus spoke, and he was actually really funny. He tells quite a funny story about how it was him and Gary O'Connor up front, and the person that was marking him was Bobo Baldi, and he was clever enough to convince Gary O'Connor that he could beat him for pace. And after 5 minutes, Bobo Baldi takes him out and he says, "No, we need to swap Tam. That's it. We've had enough." He's fantastic. But no, I think that's a great dinner party. A lot of people that we've had on before have had some of the legends of the game, like Diego Maradona. They've had guys like Johan Cruyff, Sir Alex Ferguson as well is usually quite a regular name that comes up. But no, I think that's a fantastic dinner party, and I'm sure you'll need to ask them in advance how they want their steak cooked. If I look through the comments, it's either blue or well done. So might be a hard one to get right.
Medium rare with some caramelized onions, a little bit of mashed potato. That's how it'll be in the Mitchell household, Carl.
Sounds fantastic. And please do get involved if you're watching us on any of the channels we're on. We're live on YouTube, we're live on Facebook, and we're also live on Twitter. I'm just looking to see if anyone has submitted their team. I see here Kev McSweet 44 has said Dalglish, Charlton, Jerry Taggart, and Roy Keane. That would certainly be an interesting dinner table. I don't know if you've managed to see the video that's going around social media at the minute of Roy Keane at the Manchester United quiz. Don't know if you saw that.
No, I love that. I mean, Roy Keane. Now, I find a lot of fault with Roy Keane and some of the things that he's done in the past. There's no doubt. I mean, he's not. Roy Keane is his own man, and you can agree on certain things and disagree. If you take him as a pundit, I mean, Keane and Souness in a studio for me are exceptional. They just grasp the game. They tell it how it is. Keane doesn't want to sugarcoat things. He's a born winner, and I quite like the grumpiness that it goes. That's really nice. It would be good. I would like to meet Kenny Dalglish again, because I had a couple of experiences interviewing him after games, and none of which went particularly well, because he was quite a difficult person to interview. I mean, Kenny Dalglish is one of my heroes. I based a school project in primary school on Kenny Dalglish and things like that. He's a wonderful football player. But when you're meeting somebody who's not had a good result and they're under a little bit of pressure, they might be a little bit short and sharp with some, young journalists they've never seen. I don't have a problem with that. I am told that Kenny Dalglish is a lovely guy with a wonderful sense of humour. I'd like to see that at some point. He was on my list of people potentially to invite to my dinner party. But your heroes, I was just trying to capture people that would interest me perhaps at the moment.
I mean, maybe eventually we'll be able to invite more people to the dinner party, but it might get quite expensive if you keep cooking them steaks, so we'll keep it to 4 at the minute. But no, that's a fantastic dinner party. And if you are watching us, do get involved and let us know who you would have round to your house. Before we move on to our next topic, I'm just wanting to move away from football or association football and take a look at American football, which I know you're a fan of. They're just coming into the playoffs this year round. For everyone that's watching, who would you tip to win the Super Bowl this year?
I think Kansas City are the most dangerous team, although it's very hard to repeat. My own team is the New Orleans Saints. We face Tampa Bay on Sunday. We've beaten them twice already this season. I'm very nervous about it, I have to say. It's interesting. People ask me who I support, and I give them two answers. One is the New Orleans Saints, and two is the Tampa Bay Rays, because these are the two teams that I get irrational about. I don't get irrational about football. I don't get, people, if anybody wants to check my background, I grew up as a Hearts fan. I make no secret of that. I get accused more often of being a Hibs fan than a Hearts fan, but that's another story.
That must be a sore one.
It's bizarre, but it's funny. I've been accused of supporting every team in the league, and it's usually I get accused of whoever team is getting beat. The BBC got a great complaint letter about me. I did a Hearts Celtic game at Tynecastle in which Henrik Larsson scored a hat-trick. It was a thing of beauty. And I was accused of being the most biased Celtic fan in the world and all this sort of stuff, which made me laugh. So I've been accused of supporting everybody. But my irrationality comes with the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Rays. They're the two teams that I look at. And sometimes, football's brilliant because we all overreact to our own team. I don't overreact to Scotland because I've been there, seen it, done it with Scotland. The same with Hearts. Nothing bothers me. As I've told people before, if I was covering Hearts in a cup final and was given a choice, Colin, of Hearts winning the cup final 1-0 and I was rotten, or Hearts losing the cup final 6-0 and I was brilliant, I'll take the 6-0 and I was brilliant. Simple as that. Slightly narcissistic perhaps, but when I'm covering any team, I'm doing a job, and I want to do the job to the best of my ability. It really is that simple for me. But I can get nice and irrational about the Saints and the Rays, so I do.
So Kansas City is your tip. My team didn't even make the playoffs. I backed the Giants, mostly because of Lawrence Tynes, a Scottish player who was actually born in Greenock, my hometown. So that's where that kind of has came from. But actually, if I was to give a tip this year, you probably won't like it. I would go with Tampa. I think Tampa, they seem to score a lot of points. They can't keep the other teams out the end zone, but they do put the points on the board. And that game at the weekend will certainly be one to look forward to. But we'll come away from American football before we lose our audience completely. But you can check out Paul on the NFL Scotland podcast after this if you are into American football. But let's discuss your career in general. It's fantastic to have someone of your caliber on this podcast today. You've covered, it must be close to thousands of games now that you've done commentary for.
Yeah, it's interesting. I keep every game that I do from a reference point of view, and I had to buy a new bookcase last year because the files were expanding so much. I started with the BBC in 1991. I would like to point out I was 22 at the time, so I was quite young. In case people think, I've been around a long time. But I love it. Last night I did Dundee United St Johnstone. That was exciting to me to do as other games that I've done. I love what I do with a great passion. I love to prepare for games. I love to execute them properly. It's just a joy. It really is.
So you're obviously now celebrating your 30th year with the BBC. Over that time, there's been so many ups and downs. You've saw 2 Scottish teams making European finals, both of them losing. There's been periods of domination on both sides. You've seen basically both of the 9 in a row eras. So over this period, what would you say has been your highlight as a commentator over the last 30 years?
I think the day that I was given the job as BBC's main TV commentator was a highlight, because it's not something that had actually ever occurred to me. I just wanted to, to be a decent commentator and things like that and get on with it. I got my first commentary in 1998 for radio. I got my first TV commentary in 2001. I got my first main TV commentary in 2004, and shortly after that, with Rob moving to Setanta, there was a gap there, and I was the fortunate one to get in there. So to answer your question, every cup final that I did was a privilege, because it's an amazing experience. I've done 12 for television, and there's just something special about a cup final day, be it the Scottish Cup, be it the League Cup. It's just something magical. That expectation of the support, the chance of silverware, the chance of an upset. So much research and preparation to do. So I loved every cup final that I did. I've enjoyed travelling. I mean, the travelling's been brilliant. I've been away with so many teams. I've been Rangers, Celtic, Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, Dundee United, Kilmarnock. Lots of teams, Motherwell, and that's a joy as well, because you get a little bit of interaction with fans. In bars the night before and things like that, and that's just good fun. And you get to meet some brilliant people along the way. So all these European travels, and some of the trips are a little bit more difficult than others in terms of traveling and getting there, and weird food, and Ukraine was a weird place. For example, Moldova. I doubt I'll ever go back to Moldova, but boy, I've been there once, and that was stunning. So it's just all of these things that you get the chance to do that have been fantastic. I've been to some great venues, Stade de France, Parc de France, the San Siro, places that I've only ever seen, television, growing up watching them. So the chance to work at them has been tremendous.
Would you have a sort of favourite of the stadiums that you've visited? I mean, I've been lucky enough to go to San Siro. It's a fantastic stadium, and I think that's now set for demolition coming up. They're going to knock that down. I've been lucky enough to be at the Allianz. I've been at the
that's really upsetting. Yeah.
What would you say has been the favourite stadium that you've been to?
I mean, the San Siro is memorable because of those, the four towers in the corner, and just the atmosphere within it, and all that's gone before. I mean, it's just a magnificent place. Now, I was there, and one of the things that I used to do, it's harder now because people are a lot more security conscious. But I used to try and wander around stadiums as much as I possibly could, so I got into the dressing rooms at the San Siro, which at the time were absolutely dreadful. They'd yet to be refurbished properly. But I then got to look at some of the hospitality suites, and they were just out of this world, so it was just, I would have prioritised the dressing rooms personally, but they hadn't done so. And just being able to walk out the tunnel and things like that in these places. The Stade de France is amazing as well. It's just a brilliant stadium, just superbly done. So there's places like that I've really enjoyed watching.
So have you done the Nou Camp? Have you commentated from the Nou Camp before?
No, bizarrely, I've never worked at the Nou Camp, but if folks remember, it's about 6 years ago now. In a long story, which I won't go into, that I was able to voice a Nike advert, and was in a Nike advert. That was filmed in Barcelona, but it wasn't filmed at the Nou Camp. It was filmed at Espanyol Stadium, which is obviously the second team of Barcelona. So I did get the opportunity I was driven around parts of Barcelona. I saw the Olympic Stadium there, I saw the Nou Camp from a distance, but it was Espanyol Stadium that I worked at there, which was great. The Nou Camp would have been fabulous, but Espanyol's ground was great as well.
The reason I ask is I have actually did the tour of the Nou Camp, and they take you into the media bit, which is a way up, and the main stand is high up as you can go. And you're looking down onto the pitch. And I remember being at the Nou Camp. I've been lucky to be there twice. Once way up in the top tier, where it literally looks as if you're watching a game of Football Manager, where all the players are just moving around and you can see the ball just about. And another time where I was literally about 6 rows from the front of the bottom tier. And the view is so different. Now, obviously, with you being a commentator, a lot of the times you find yourselves quite high up in the gantry. Do you think that you get a better view from the position you're in to watch it and to try and commentate on the game? Or as you've mentioned before, when you were on the touchline at the Spartans game, where would be the ideal scenario for you to be placed so that you could get a view of the game to portray that back to everyone that's listening?
You want to be as central as possible. And that might sound obvious, but not everybody puts the commentary positions centrally because they want them for season ticket holders or people coming into hospitality. You do need to be up a certain level. I think I've done games at Murrayfield, for example, and I think it's too low. I think the commentary position's too low. It's quite far back from the pitch as well, but it's too low. So if I run through some commentary positions, I mean, the commentary position at Celtic Park for radio is a little bit off centre, but it's at the perfect height. Mm-hmm. The commentary position for television at Celtic, you've got to walk up to the back of the stand, you climb a ladder, you go onto the roof, you walk across the roof, and then you come down a set of steps into a cradle which literally hangs below the main stand. You get an awesome view. I mean, it's tremendous, but walking across that roof can be a little bit challenging. But I mean, I've been lucky enough. I did quite a few Celtic games in Europe when I was the main commentator for telly, and being up on that roof on your own, being able to know that to your left-hand side, you've got almost a packed stadium. On your right-hand side, you can see everybody else coming in and buzzing and getting ready. You just almost take a breath for a moment and think, wow, this is tremendous. And it is. I love working there. Ibrox is tremendous. We tend to be central along the middle gantry. That's at the perfect height. One of my favourites is no longer there. It was the old stand at Easter Road. The television position was in the old stand at Easter Road. And again, it was a bit of a cradle. So you walked up a long gantry that basically hung above the supporters. And you looked out. You almost felt you could reach over and touch the players. You were that close. That was a fabulous place. Hearts have a little gantry that I think is too tight, so they've moved the commentators downstairs to more of the main stand, but you're a little bit in amongst the supporters. I had to laugh because I saw that Hibs have drawn Queen of the South in the Scottish Cup, and the last time I was there, before Queen of the South had basically put a broadcast platform, they basically sold most of the seats, and basically I got put in with a monitor and my mixer, and I had Hibs fans all around me. They were leaning over and watching the replays and things like that, and it's very, very difficult. I did a Hearts game, Hearts against Celtic, and Sky were in the little gantry, so I got put downstairs before they built everything, and I was in amongst the Hearts fans. Celtic, I think, won 3-0. You try doing a brilliant goal for Celtic when you're in the middle of thousands of Hearts fans. People look at you and I'm like, it's not my fault. I didn't score the goal, but I'm being paid to describe it. So, please don't take it out on me. But yeah, and these are fun. And I'll tell you what, 99% of football fans, if not more, are brilliant anyway. They appreciate what you're doing and why you're there to doing it. And they won't give you a hassle. I don't mind people taking the mickey. That's fine. I mean, I've had very little hassle in all the times that I've been at grounds. I quite like people being funny. And as I say, the Hibs fans at Queen of the South just leaning over, almost touching my shoulder to watch the replays as I'm describing them was brilliant.
So, I mean, you've obviously covered a lot of games in Scottish football. You've covered it across Europe. Is there still one thing left on the kind of bucket list that you need to do before you retire as a commentator?
Well, retirement will be a long time away, touch wood, because I love doing what I'm doing. I got into this very young, and I intend to keep doing it for as long as I could. No, I mean, I've been lucky enough. I've covered, Scottish Cup finals. I've covered League Cup finals. I've covered the English Premiership down south for Match of the Day. I've covered my national team traveling. It would be nice to do Scotland in a major championships. I mean, that would be the dream. I would love to go to a World Cup. I've been to an under-20 World Cup with Scotland back in Canada in 2007, which was slightly surreal. We didn't do particularly well. We thought we would do well. So I've had that tournament disappointment that not every commentator's been able to experience. I'm delighted we're back there again. I'd love to be involved somehow. I don't think it'll happen, but I would love to be involved somehow.
So Are you planning to do the Euros this summer? Has there been any discussion? Will you be part of the commentary team?
I don't think I will be because I'm not high enough up the pecking order anymore, and that's just fact. It's just the way it is. So I'm exploring other options to see if it would be possible, because I would like to be. I mean, who wouldn't want to be part of that? And if not, we'll just pop on the Scotland jersey and support the boys, and hopefully we can do well.
I mean, I'm very much looking forward to this summer. I've actually already booked accommodation to go down to the game against England if we get the chance to go ahead and go down and do that. I think it will be a fantastic occasion. I really just hope that the tournament goes ahead. As we discussed earlier with the Scottish football season, I really hope that we actually have something to look forward to, because after 23 years of not being able to qualify for a tournament, it would just be Scotland's luck that the tournament didn't go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I do have concerns, and slightly curmudgeonly, about the route that we took to qualify. I've got concerns that, it's almost crumbs that we were offered, the way that UEFA have, got all the tier one teams playing together, and you don't have the friendlies that you used to have. There's almost an exclusivity coming, and it's almost, well, we'll give you this backdoor route to come and qualify. We've expanded the tournament, so I've got reservations about that in the footballing ethos sense. I'm delighted we're there. Don't get me wrong, I'll take it. I don't like the way in which it was all manipulated behind the scenes. I would rather we just won our group and qualified, but hey, we can dream. We can dream.
And I remember listening to a Scotland game on BBC Scotland, maybe about 2 years ago now, and Ollie Burke was up front. And I remember listening to the guys in the studio at half time, and there was no sort of analysis of the game. It was all about the analysis on whether Ollie Burke was good enough to be a professional footballer. And I can't remember who was in the studio at the time, but I just remember listening to it and going, "This is fantastic," because I saw Ollie Burke play, and I think he's a fantastic athlete, but I don't think he's got the basics of football fundamentals. And you're kind of seeing that now when he's down south. I don't think he's scored at all for. Oh no, he scored at the weekend in the FA Cup, but he's not scored in the league for Sheffield United. And just not having that analysis on the radio, I think would be a massive loss. And I think the job that you guys do is fantastic. So if you're going to be commentating for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, then I'm very much looking forward to it. So keep up the good work. We're going to finish off with one last topic, and it's quite a funny topic. Mark Wright, for anyone who has watched The Only Way is Essex, was a former cast member, but before that he was also part of some non-league football teams. He's now signed for League Two side Crawley, and actually came off the bench at the weekend when Crawley beat, it was Leeds, wasn't it? They beat Leeds 3-0. He's now came out as this is part of a documentary series with BBC iPlayer, where it was his last chance at playing football. He's 33 years old. In your opinion, is this a publicity stunt, or do you really think that he will make it as a footballer?
We live in the era of social media content, and everything is being driven by social media. What can you get? What will hook people? People's attention span isn't quite as good as it once was, and you're trying to find an edge. Personally, I'm offended by what they did. He's not a football player. He would have made it long before now, and I think that was a cheap and horrible thing to do against a professional team. So I don't like it personally. Can I understand why they've done it? Yes, but I don't like seeing professional sport being used in that way. I personally think that's disrespectful. Now, there's plenty of people who think it's great, it's funny, he deserves it. That's fine. That's your opinion. I've got mine. I didn't like it. I don't know how many people would like that to happen against their team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. If Celtic are winning, 3-0 against Dundee United and suddenly decide to bring on, Rod Stewart, I don't think Dundee United would be particularly pleased. Now it'd be funny, it'd be entertaining, but and obviously that's a facetious example. Rod Stewart should compulsory do the Scottish Cup draws from now on. because he's brilliant at those. So no, I mean that I didn't think that was particularly great. I'm not a massive fan of trying to manufacture topics for documentaries. I think we've all seen the all or nothings that have come out.
Hmm.
I thought the Man City one was dull,
Hmm.
whereas the Tottenham one's been a little bit better. But the problem is we live in an age, and in fact we don't. We've always been there. We've lived in an age of copycats. Once you get a successful format, people want to copy it. Go to American television and look at ER, Chicago Hope, all the spin-offs. Everybody's
Yep.
suddenly a hospital drama. So these things happen, and I think with these things, I don't like the Mark Wright thing. Basically, in the words of Dragon's Den, I'm out. If others want to have fun with it, that's great. It wouldn't have been my decision, and I think Crawley were a little bit naughty in allowing it.
I mean, we're also in the era where fans can't make it into the grounds. So, I mean, we saw it before. I think it was Doncaster who signed Louis Tomlinson of One Direction to be part of their development side, and he played in a friendly, and it brought in things like I think it was like 10,000 fans came to a reserve game just because he was playing. A lot of them being kind of young kids with the banners and stuff like that. So I think genuinely he believes he can make it. Mark Wright. I think he believes he can play at that level. You saw him when he played in the Soccer Aid games, and he was probably one of the better celebrities that played in those games. And I think he still thinks he can make it. I don't think he can make it at a League Two side, though. I think he's aiming really, really high because that would suggest that the standard of League Two isn't that great. And you saw players that have moved on from League Two, like Ivan Toney, who's moved up to the Championship, scored nearly 20 goals already this season. Dele Alli came from League One. So, yeah, it's. I think it's probably bringing the standard down, but I can see your point of view, but I still think that he could make it as a footballer, but just not at the level he's at.
Yeah, I mean, it's using your leverage to get something that perhaps a lot of us would want. I mean, there's probably nobody watching this or will watch this that wouldn't like to have pulled on the jersey for the team that they support and given everything to do that. Now he's being manipulative in getting that. You often see this with actors who suddenly go away and become singers and record albums. They would never have been able to do that unless they'd been a successful actor. You get singers who suddenly become actors who are not good actors. There's hundreds of people better than them. So this happens. I get it. There's a trend in radio and music radio to have celebrities rather than decent presenters. Radio 2 is full of people who've been successful on television. So suddenly they get a radio show on Radio 2, for example. It's not the way I would do it, but if people want that, that's fine. So there's always that cross germination, and people are looking for things. You mentioned Doncaster. That's a great example of trying to get an interest in a team. In America, at the weekend, they showed one of the playoff games on Nickelodeon, the kids channel.
Yeah, saw that. Yeah.
And that's all over social media. So if you've been on Twitter, if you're linked in with somebody who likes the NFL, the chances are you've seen them retweet that or like that, slime in the end zones and pictures of SpongeBob between the posts. If that's what people want, that's great. I'm all for innovation. The Mark Wright thing just seems like a bit stale from my point of view. But if people enjoy it and take something from it, then hey, go for it. As I say, I'm a libertarian. It's that live and let live. You want that? That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, if Mark Wright's going to do it, then we wish him all the best. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at his career, he's played for Crawley before. He's actually got one cap in the England C team, which I think is about the same as Chris Sutton. So he's obviously done something in his younger years. I'm being facetious, you know what I mean.
I do.
But
I do.
I'll look forward to watching the documentary on iPlayer. I'll definitely give it a watch. Um, as I have done with the Man City documentaries, with the Spurs documentaries, even the Hearts documentary that was on a couple of weeks ago. It was a good watch. But do you know what? All the best to him. So good luck to Mark Wright as for the rest of the season. But Paul, we've nearly been speaking for an hour now, and it's
Wow.
been absolutely fantastic. I know it's absolutely fluent, and it's been fantastic to have you on the show. What's your next game? Where will we hear you on the radio next?
I'm waiting to find out where I'll be heading at the weekend, whether it'll be for radio or television. I'm disappointed the Scottish Cup's off, fully understandable, but Scottish Cup weekend's always one of the highlights of the year, so I'm disappointed about that. But I tend to get my games about a week in advance, sometimes a few days, in advance. There's just so much football on at the moment, Colin. It's quite hard. It's pretty tough at the moment on the BBC production staff trying to keep up with absolutely everything and games going off and games coming on and things like that. So I look forward to getting my assignment and getting out there. Part of the fun, I love the preparation for the games as well. So that's part of the fun during the week.
And it's been absolutely a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you very much for being our guest for the start of season 2. This has been the Football Insomniac podcast. We're live on a State of Mind YouTube channel. We're live on Facebook. We're live on Twitter. Thank you to everyone who got involved in the comment section today. And Paul, where can everyone find you after this broadcast?
Twitter is the main place to find me. I'm at PWM Comms, so that's at PWM Comms. I try to post mainly about sport, American, Scottish football. I try and stay away from the more serious topics, but I get there occasionally.
I think we all do. But yeah, thank you to everyone who's got involved. It's been a pleasure to bring this back to you. We're back next week with the author Daniel Gray. I'm very much looking forward to speaking to him. But until then, to everyone, please stay safe, stay at home, and we'll see you